I've been skiing for as long as I've been able to walk. My parents used to ski competitively. That's actually how they met, so it was really important to them that my siblings and I learned as early as possible. Fast forward about 20 odd years and that's how old I am now. This story happened to me a few winters ago when I was 21 years old. I was a senior in college. Everyone knows the best skiing accessible to the Northeast is Vermont. It was going to be a trip like any other. It was me, Jaden, Rylan, and Amir. I can't remember for the life of me what mountain we were skiing that trip, as Jaden had booked the whole thing and Rylan was driving. What I do remember was that it was massive, with like 7 ski lifts covering all the different peaks. If I had to guess, it was Killington. We skied nearly 2 full days, and I'm sure there were still trails we missed. That's how big it was. After skiing the day before, we had a pretty good grasp on the trails we enjoyed, so this day would be mostly about testing ourselves and pushing the limits. I'd also be lying if I said we didn't have a handful of fireball shooters to liven things up. We were having an extremely enjoyable trip. The double blacks never got boring, and racing down each slope was its own little game. We had maybe an hour left until the lifts closed. We were all exhausted, but we knew as soon as we hit the road to head home, we'd instantly miss the mountain again. We were contemplating how we would end the trip at the top of the lifts when 2 girls without their helmets made their way over to us. Now this might sound a little bit odd to some people, but I wouldn't be doing this story any justice if I left this out of detail. The girls, 1 brunette and 1 blonde, were dead drop gorgeous, and I don't say that in any type of strange way. They were just objectively 2 of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen in person. It was disarming. They introduced themselves as Taylor and Devin, and when we started making small talk, they basically told us that they were bored because the mountain was full of older folk, which was actually something I had remarked to my friends about the day before, so it made sense why they approached us. Devin seemed like a really seasoned skier, as she kept asking Amir all these technical questions about his skis. Him and Rylan actually own their own expensive skis as opposed to renting like Jaden and I always did, which the girls seemed to be impressed with. Taylor made a comment about her shooters and we jokingly told them that the alcohol unlocked our true ski potential or something dumb like that, which they found funny. To our surprise, Devin pulled out an unmarked bottle and taunted us, calling us bitches for sticking to a drink as tame as Fireball. The 4 of us welcomed the challenge and happily swigged some of their bottle, which I could tell sent Rylan a little over the edge. He tends to drink more than he can handle, so this wasn't too surprising. I made a note not to drink too much because something about this whole situation just rubbed me the wrong way. I still had trouble believing that these 2 girls would want anything to do with some dumb kids like us, especially since we were all wearing helmets and our faces weren't exactly visible. Things were going really well though. Amir was being his usual, overly flirtatious self, but Taylor seemed to like it and she was into it, so I didn't complain. I figured we were just going to spend the remainder of our time on the slope with these girls, which I didn't really mind too much. Hell, maybe they even knew something we could do after the slopes closed. Just then, Devin asked us if we'd skied down a trail called the Devil's Forest, a name which I definitely didn't recognize. Our other friend Chase would have had the trail map memorized as he's literally a walking GPS, but he wasn't with us. We told them we hadn't, and they explained that it was a glade trail that's a little obscure and rarely open. For those who don't know, glades are basically trails that extend in between trees so that you're skiing through a forest. We actually enjoyed skiing glades more than anything else, so this Devil's Forest trail piqued our interest. We told them we were game and they motioned for us to follow them. We reached a choke point on our skis and they told them to take them off because we had to walk slightly uphill for a short while. I could tell we were in a relatively desolate part of the mountain as the snow was perfectly fresh and there was no one around. The thought of an adventure was kind of invigorating though, so I thought nothing of it. Drunk and curious, we clipped our skis off and followed the girls up the mountain. Amir and Rylan ran ahead, presumably to flirt some more with them, and Jaden and I hung out back a little bit to give them some space. As we followed, I could tell Jaden looked a little weary, so I asked him what was on his mind. I like to think of us as the rational, level-headed ones in the group. Amir was too unpredictable and impulsive, and Rylan would follow a girl if she led him off a cliff. Jaden said that it was weird that this supposed trail would be inaccessible from a ski lift, which I agreed with. I had never had to walk uphill to reach a trail before. We agreed to just keep a keen eye on things. What could 2 girls do to a group of 4 big guys anyway? They led us into the forest and the terrain finally started leveling out. Jaden and I caught up with the group and it was apparent that Rylan and Amir had both made considerable progress. Rylan had his arm around Devin, who was smiling and laughing. They pointed in the same direction we had been traveling, which had all of a sudden become a downward slope. I sighed, knowing this was another instance where we could have used Chase's help. He would have known exactly where we were and where this trail would have led. Jaden was still skeptical and asked the girls if they were sure that this was a real trail. They responded yes and told us that it would also take us right back to the lifts. Before I could say anything, Devin pulled the bottle out again and told us that we had to finish it. Amir and Rylan happily took some hefty swigs, but when the bottle got around to Jaden, he said he had enough to drink. As soon as he spoke, I could have sworn Devin's smile became a really angry scowl for a split second, but by the time I blinked, she was smiling again. I must have been the only one to notice because I looked around at my friends and their expressions were all normal. She put on a seductive smile and batted her eyes at Jaden, asking him nicely. He reluctantly grabbed the bottle, if just to shut her up. By the time it got to me, I put the bottle up to my mouth but didn't actually drink. Everything about this encounter was starting to trigger alarm bells in my head. I handed the bottle back to Devin, who put it away. I noted that neither girl drank this time around. It dawned on me that I hadn't seen either one of them drink anything this whole time. I checked my phone, half an hour until the lifts closed. I tried to come up with some excuse for why we couldn't ski this trail, saying that we wouldn't have enough time to get back up and down the mountain to where we had parked. The girls insisted that we'd have enough time and that the lifts were connected at the bottom anyways. Then, without warning, they told us that we were wasting too much time and took off toward the slope, telling us to follow them if we could. Amir and Rylan immediately followed, clearly hoping for a favorable outcome at the bottom. Jaden and I obviously didn't want to, but we figured we had no choice and had to follow, so that's what we did. I let Jaden lead the way because after all, this was still a challenging looking slope and skiing in the forest is no joke. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but when we made it to the bottom, I was relieved. The four of them were at the bottom of the slope, laughing and flirting like they had been before. Jaden and I caught up with the group, but something was wrong. There wasn't a lift in sight. We were still surrounded by forest on all sides. I sternly asked the girls where the lift was, and they told me to stop worrying and that it was close by. Then they said they'd take us there in a few minutes. I relaxed a little, assuming that I was worried this whole time about nothing. As I was rubbing my eyes, I heard a distinct thump in the snow. I opened them to see Rylan, who was literally passed out on his back in the snow. The girls laughed, calling him a lightweight, but I could tell it was more serious than that. Before I could even react, Amir slumped over too. I started freaking out and I rushed over to them, unclipping my skis. I thanked my lucky stars that they seemed to be breathing normally, but I was beyond horrified. Jaden took a step towards the girls, asking them what the hell was going on. They seemed genuinely shocked, saying they have no idea what was wrong. Jaden took another step before he too passed out in the snow. I stared in shock, still trying to wrap my head around the gravity of the situation. I just couldn't fathom that this was happening to us. My head started spinning and I was sure that I was next. The girls had stopped pretending by now and they looked at me like they were waiting for me to pass out. I felt myself getting dizzy, so I sat down in the snow even though I wanted to stay on my feet. I demanded to know what they had given us. They didn't respond or even move for that matter. I yelled at them over and over again, but they still didn't react. I wanted to get up, but I quite literally couldn't stand. I didn't pass out though. I kept my eyes open the whole time. Eventually, Taylor turned to Devin and said something along the lines of, "He must have not drank enough." She looked more pissed off than anything. Devin cursed before telling Taylor that they had to go. I was still frozen. After unclipping their skis, I watched them take Amir and Rylan's skis before trudging off into the woods. I had to do something, but my body still felt numb. I couldn't just let them walk off with my friend's skis. I knew they wouldn't be able to move that fast carrying 2 sets of skis each, especially through the snow. Another few minutes passed and I started to regain control of my body. I stumbled after their tracks in the snow, but it was actually freakish how far they'd gotten, even with all that added weight. Eventually, I hit a bend and saw them in the distance, way ahead of me. I figured as long as I kept them in sight, I'd be able to track them down. I followed for a couple minutes, and that's when things got crazy. The forest gave way to a clearing, which I could see turned into a road. We must have literally been on the opposite side of the ski mountain, which made sense looking back. That's when I noticed the van parked in the distance. I stopped in my tracks at the edge of the woods. The side of the van opened and 4 big-looking dudes stepped out to intercept the girls. The girls motioned for the guys to get back in the van, and one of them turned and pointed directly at me. That's when I realized I was in too deep and also felt like an idiot for leaving my helpless friends unconscious in the woods. The guys from inside the van seemed to be debating whether or not they should leave or chase me, and I wasn't waiting around for another second. I started wobbling back the way I came, knowing I'd be able to find my friends on the account of the tracks I left behind in the snow. I found them, still passed out. I figured Jaden had the least to drink, so I tried shaking him awake first. After a couple handfuls of snow to the face, he was awake enough to talk. I told them what happened, still in shock. We tried waking Amir and Rylan up, but no luck. Jaden and I figured we had no better option than praying those guys didn't decide to track us down, but they never came. I might not be telling this story if they had. We waited about an hour for our friends to wake up, and when they finally did, we told them everything. We had a million questions. Who were those girls? Who were those other guys? And what were they going to do to us? It was chilling imagining what could have happened had I not been quick enough to pretend to drink. Best case scenario was that we would have just woken up robbed, but even that would have been horrible. Something tells me that no one would go to those extremes just to rob some broke college-looking kids. Besides, who really keeps valuables on them when skiing? I guess Amir and Ryland's expensive skis were worth stealing, but it still felt like overkill. Plus, how would they have even known that we had expensive skis with us as opposed to renting? Things didn't make sense. Finding the car was hell, reporting it to the police was hell, the drive back home was even worse. The people running the mountain swore they'd identify those people, but we obviously had to get back on the road and couldn't verify that. The police took it a little more seriously and told us we'd be updated should anything come up. I think it even made local news, but it's been years now and they obviously never found anything. To this day, we have no idea what kind of roofie they even gave us. Nothing online described anything that was so effective so quickly, especially in a moderately small amount. Our best guess was that the substance was a mix of drugs, which makes sense because all of my friends were feeling kind of woozy after they woke up. Those girls and whoever else was behind the whole thing were some sick people. I can only hope it was just an elaborate robbery and nothing more sinister. This week has been hectic. My 3 kids have the flu, oldest was the first, and then my younger 2 caught it. After a visit to the clinic, I was heading to the CVS down the street from our house for their prescriptions. I decided last minute to drop my kids off at home with their dad so they could rest and I could go inside the store to pick up some Pedialyte. I consider our neighborhood to be safe. I've taken walks after dark and have never felt afraid. Most of our neighbors are older folks who have lived there over a decade. When I pulled up to the CVS, I parked on the side parallel to our street. It's darker on that side, but the entrance is right around the corner and well lit. There was a man standing outside. He walked in front of my car and I could hear him talking, but my music was kind of loud. I figured he was on his phone or something. No real red flags yet. My husband called me as the man walked back towards the corner adjacent to the entrance. I got out of my car, still on the phone, telling my husband, yeah, the kiddos have the flu, I'm picking up medicine at the CVS, etc. In a very pleasant voice, the man says to me, hey, I got a question for you. You know where Main Street is? I tell him I do, assuming he is asking for directions or the location of something. I'm still holding the phone to my ear. It's in a bright pink case, so I'm sure he could see it. Now, this man is standing directly in front of me. There is a pillar and a trash can behind him. Around the corner is a propane cage and a red box against the store's wall. Getting past him would have put me in arm's reach. Next, he asked me for a ride there, to a homeless shelter. It's very cold outside and he doesn't want to freeze. I empathized with him, but I said I couldn't. I offered to buy him some gloves and a warm blanket, and I actually asked the employee in the store if he could assist in finding him a ride. The guy's face instantly changed to pure rage, then right back to pleasant. Well, you know what happens to homeless people stuck outside. You're going to help me. It's right down the street. My husband is on the phone asking me what's going on. I gently tell the man that I don't feel comfortable doing that and that I have the flu. I don't. And my husband is on the phone with me. I don't care about the flu, he said. Now he's getting more angry and not moving away from my route into the store. I didn't want to turn my back on him to go to my car, which was several feet away in the dark. While this guy is glaring at me, I decided to quickly walk past him. I had my mask from the clinic in my jacket pocket, so I pulled that out and held it in front of me while I moved towards the trash can. He looked disgusted, but he kept telling me that I needed to give him a ride, that it's right down the street, and kept insisting. But I know where that street is, and it's not as close as he says. He tried to guilt me, and his words felt threatening, but he didn't actually threaten me verbally. Once I was around the corner, I rushed into the store and straight to the pharmacy. My husband said he's calling the police, and that he heard the way the man was talking to me and said to stay in the store. My knees were shaking. I'm not usually the type to be afraid when confronted. When I got to the pharmacy, I interrupted the pharmacist and a customer, apologizing, then told them what happened. The pharmacist sent the store manager out, a tall guy with a long beard. Looked like he doesn't take crap from people. The police had already arrived. The man was told to leave, which he did momentarily. He came back inside the store yelling obscenities and something about me. The cop came back to talk to me and she told me that she's arrested this man many times. He's loud and likes to yell at people, but he isn't violent. The pharmacist had me hiding behind the screen where they gave vaccines and left half the door to the pharmacy cracked open in case I needed to get the hell out of there. The cop had also told me this guy's first and last name, as did the store manager. Is that normal? The police parked next to my car to keep an eye on me. Oh, and by the way, the man refused a ride from the cop to the shelter. When I got home, I looked up his name. His name is unique, so it was easy to find online. Surprise, surprise, he has a long record spanning 3 states and several counties. Tons of public intoxication charges, DWI, urinating in public, assault and battery, and indecent exposure. I also looked up the homeless shelter. Yeah, as I thought, there isn't one where he wanted me to take him, but that area is super sketchy. Earlier today, I went to the corner store across from the CVS and told my friend, who happens to be the overnight shift employee, what happened. She kicks him out of the store and calls the police every time she sees him because he yells and threatens customers, but he always takes off just before the police arrive. I know I could have handled that better. I was blindsided by his instant shift from pleasant to filled with rage. But big thank you to the pharmacy team who kept me safe and the store manager for confronting the creep. They didn't have to do all that. I'm also thankful my husband recognized I was in an unsafe situation over the phone. That man is still somewhere out there in my area and it haunts me every day. This is gonna sound a little weird, but bear with me. Every winter, my friends Kyle, Ricky, and I have this little tradition of walking out onto this frozen lake a few towns over. It's not some grand event or anything, we just do it for fun. There's something about the vibe of being out there on the ice, surrounded by the quiet stillness that feels almost otherworldly. It's just one of those simple things we've always enjoyed. Call us weird, but we can never get enough of the serenity. If you've ever been out in nature by yourself, with the only sound being the gentle patter of snowflakes, you know what I'm talking about. It feels like you've got a piece of nature all to yourself. The photos always turn out great too, which is a huge plus for a couple of edgy guys like us. This happened this past winter. It's April as I'm writing this, so about 4 months ago now. I know you're probably thinking, but don't worry, none of us fell through the ice. That's not what this story is about. It was snowing pretty heavily that night, which was the main reason we decided to go. It had been consistently below freezing for a couple of weeks too, so we were relatively confident the lake was completely frozen over. I'd personally take winter over summer any day of the week. I bet all my friends would agree. There are about a million reasons why, but one of them is as simple as the snowfall itself. First of all, it's just pretty. What I like most about it though is that you'll never find yourself in complete darkness. Even after sunset, the world isn't entirely dark. The light reflecting off the white snow blends day and night, so you're left with this really surreal feeling that doesn't arise from anything else. The moon was also pretty full that night, so that feeling was amplified. Kyle was driving that night. He had a pickup that handled pretty well in the snow, so we just played it safe and let him drive, even though Ricky was usually the one who chauffeured us around. The lake itself is surrounded by a thin forest, so we couldn't actually drive all the way to the water's edge. I don't think forest is the right word. It's really just a cluster of sparsely scattered trees, but it's more than enough to prevent a car from driving through. We parked in a nearby lot and got out of the car. It was freezing out. The 3 of us bundled up and walked toward the lake. I didn't smoke at the time, I still don't, but Ricky and Kyle both do, so they lit a couple of cigarettes as we walked. I think it was after midnight, but I can't say for sure. All I remember is that there wasn't a soul out there. Not an animal, not a person, nothing. No movement whatsoever besides the 3 of us. We reached the lake, and as we anticipated, it seemed completely frozen over. The 3 of us were laughing about something stupid when Kyle picked up a small boulder and chucked it onto the ice, testing its integrity. It didn't even crack. So we took that as an indication to make our way towards the middle of the lake. We obviously didn't go super far on the ice, that would have been careless, but we did venture a decent ways from the edge. We were maybe 100 feet out when something caught our attention. On the far side of the lake, near the edge where the trees bordered the ice, something big and dark was moving. We stopped talking immediately, just stopped in our tracks, watching. Whatever it was large, hunched over, and moving slowly toward the lake. Finally, we realized what we were looking at. It was a bear. Ricky was the first to say something. He whispered, "Is that a bear?" as quietly as he could. I didn't answer. My heart was already racing. If it was a bear, the last thing we wanted to do was draw its attention. We stood there, frozen, not even daring to breathe too loudly. But then, the figure moved closer. Something felt off. The way it walked wasn't quite right. Too upright, too human. It also looked like there was something dragging behind it. Nothing about it made sense. It was one of the most bizarre things I'd ever seen. And that's when it straightened up completely and we realized the truth all at once. It wasn't a bear, it was a person. A person wearing some kind of bear suit. Cal said, "What the hell?" in a low voice, and I was thinking the exact same thing. I know it doesn't sound scary in a generic sense, but if you had been there, you would have been terrified too. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know if I was more afraid or confused, but something told me to stay quiet. The figure kept moving toward the ice, dragging something behind him. At first it was hard to tell what it was, the snow blurred the details, but as he got closer I realized he was holding a rope that was attached to the thing he was dragging, and a few moments later we could see it more clearly. It was a small black bag. It looked like a smaller sized garbage bag if they even made those. Either way, it was chilling. We stood there, unsure of what to do. My mind was screaming at me to turn around and leave, but my body felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. I don't think Ricky and Kyle were too keen on turning around and leaving either, because none of them flinched. I probably wouldn't have left right then, even if I hadn't been so scared. I needed to know what that person was doing. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, the man unzipped and stepped out of the bear suit. Seeing him as a person didn't make things any better. He wasn't particularly large or intimidating, but there was something unsettling about him. We watched as he bent down, presumably to pick up a rock, but I couldn't tell from so far away. And that's when the sound started. He knelt down holding what looked like a rock and began repeatedly slamming it onto the ice. It might have been placebo, but I swear I could feel the vibration in the ice even from the distance. He was trying to break through, most likely to dispose of whatever was in that bag. Ricky tapped my shoulder and I turned to see him and Kyle moving backwards towards solid ground. Without a word, I followed suit and the three of us tried to move quickly without making too much noise. Every step felt deafening in the quiet, even though I knew there was no way that guy could hear the crunch of the snow from that far away. We barely made it a few yards when a voice yelled out, "Hey!" from behind us. I didn't even look back. I just started running, praying that guy didn't have a gun. The cold didn't help. I found myself starting to get winded after not even a minute of running. I don't know if he followed. I don't think he did, but in that moment we were in full-on panic mode. We reached the edge of the lake, and at that point I was gasping for breath. After a very short break, we made our way back to the car silently, and Kyle drove off immediately. None of us had any idea what we had just seen. Kyle said it was probably someone dumping their trash, but I told him that was ridiculous. Who in their right mind would dress up in a bear suit in the middle of the winter to illegally dump their trash? There was no way. Ricky said it was definitely someone dumping a body, but I told him the bag was way too small for that. The three of us talked about it the whole ride home, but we couldn't agree on a definitive explanation. We never got an answer. The reason I'm thinking about this now is because my mom was watching TV the other day and an old missing persons report popped up on the screen. It was a child from around our area, and the timeline of his disappearance matched up pretty closely with what we had seen on that lake. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I know it's a long shot and probably just an unfortunate coincidence, but I can't help but wonder if those two things are somehow related. By the time you're hearing this, we've probably reported our sighting to the police. If you made it this far, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions for things I can improve or video ideas, feel free to let me know in the comments. I hope you guys have a good night.